All right, so we are now live streaming. So welcome to our February 1st Heritage Kitchener meeting, everyone. We will begin. And the first thing on our agenda today is under commencement, and I will invite Garrett Stevenson to introduce our new Heritage Planner.
Thank you very much, Chair Sam. And it's with great pleasure tonight that I'm able to introduce Diksha Chowdhury, who is our new Heritage Planner here at the City of Kitchener. So as we heard at the last meeting, Victoria is currently on paternity leave and no update yet to report on, but I'll be sure to keep people updated if they're interested. But so Diksha has joined our team and would like to introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her background.
Thank you, Garrett. Hi, everyone. As Garrett said, I'm Diksha, and I've just joined the city yesterday. So I have an undergraduate degree in urban planning from the University of Waterloo, and I did my master's in architectural conservation from the University of Edinburgh. I've been passionate about heritage planning since my second year at University of Waterloo. I really like the kind of work that it involves, and I really just enjoy doing it. And so I'm so glad to be here. Most of my work experience has been in the municipal sector, working for the City of Edmonton and the City of Hamilton. I also worked for Transport Canada as part of my co-op program. So it's been a really good work experience. I also come with some international work experience working in India last year, most notably on preparing a preliminary heritage conservation plan on the existing Parliament building. So just from a varied background, and I'm really, really happy to be here. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Diksha, and welcome aboard. We're also very excited to have you, and I hope you enjoy your work with our committee. All right, so I think we'll now move on to our discussion item, which is our heritage permit application HPA 2022 V004, which is not on my sheet, but it's about the dune bridges. So I believe, because Diksha just joined us yesterday, Garrett is going to provide us with our brief overview of this item. So Garrett, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much. So Victoria had prepared this report, but I'm happy to share with you some high-level summaries of her conclusions and her recommendations. So Wood PLC had been retained by the City of Kitchener to conduct a heritage impact assessment to support the rehabilitation of the Dune Village Road Bridges 1 and 2. These bridges are owned by the City of Kitchener, and they're located within the Upper Dune Heritage Conservation District, and they're designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The HIA, in summary, had concluded that Dune Bridges 1 and 2 have cultural heritage value or interest, and concluded that potential direct impacts to the Bridge 1 and 2 are anticipated as part of the rehabilitation work. The direct impacts include coating the bridges in a pigmented sealer and replacing the existing metal guardrails. No indirect impacts to the bridges were identified within the HIA. The rehabilitation work proposed will repair and replace the existing using like-for-like materials. Appropriate mitigation measures are being recommended to address the direct impacts to the bridges as a result. And the proposed works will not adversely impact the bridges or the character of Dune Village Road or the Upper Dune Heritage Conservation District. And we are joined by members from my colleagues from the City of Kitchener, as well as Wood PLC representatives as well that can speak to any additional details.
Great, thanks, Garrett. That is a great overview. So I will pass it over to committee now for questions for either city staff or from Wood PLC or comments.
My apologies through the chair.
Yes.
Just to note that the property owner did come with the presentation today.
You're right, they absolutely did. I skipped that part. It's been a long day. Thank you, Sarah. All right, so Matthew Galloway from Wood PLC would obviously like to present their 5-minute presentation, so we will do that first. So I will pass it over to Matthew.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, just a quick presentation then on the Doon Village Road bridges. So just here's a cover sheet. Obviously, it shows a photo of one of the arches from the side. If you flick to the next slide, I think I've got a site plan there. It just puts them in context with the heritage landscape. Bridge number 1 is the one on the right. Bridge number 2 is the one on the left, but they're very similar in construction. They're concrete arch bridges, as you can see in the photos here. And I've just put a few terms that, so if I do refer to, technical and engineering terms in this presentation, this just sort of explains what I am referring to. They are arches, so the soffit is the underside of the bridge in the middle, and then where it comes down at the ends of the arch, that's what I refer to as the abutment. Because it's an arch, it's not quite as clear cut where the divide is between the abutment and the soffit as if it was a sort of box frame, but that's what I'm referring to really. The soffit is the underside, the abutment is down at the ends, at the banks. And the parapet, there's retaining walls on the sides, which are supported on the arches. The fascia, which I've just realized I've spelt wrong, should have an A on the end there, is the very side of the arch, and then the parapet walls are on top. So we can move on to the next one. And then this shows the bridge from the top. So there's 3 parapet walls, the 2 between the roadway, or on either side of the roadway, and then 1 on the outside of the sidewalk as well. And the roadway is the existing bridge going back, I think, about 100 years or so. The sidewalk, that's an extension to the bridge that was added in 1986, and it just widened the bridge by 2 meters, added an extra parapet wall on, and allowed for pedestrian access. The roadway is asphalt. And actually, it's worth looking at this photo on the left shows the existing guide rails, and it shows there's a timber plank along the sidewalk on the back side of that guide rail as well, which I'll refer to a little bit later. Okay, so we can move on to the next one. So as a general overview, Wood carried out a condition survey of both of these bridges back in 2017. We found a few things of concern. We tested some concrete in the deck. The deck being at the arch level, so above the concrete arch, there is some granular fill material before you get to the asphalt. The arch is a sort of fairly uniform thickness of, I think, about 300 or 400 millimeters thick of concrete, and then so in the very middle, there's the asphalt sits almost directly on the arch, but at the ends, there's some granular fill before you get to the asphalt. So we did take some cores through the deck. We found chlorides in there, which come from the icing salt that's used on the roads. If chlorides get into the concrete, they start to corrode the rebar. And then when the rebar corrodes, it expands and cracks the concrete above it. So that was of concern. And we found in the parapet walls, fairly low cover to the reinforcing steel, which is also of concern because it makes it easier for the chlorides to attack the rebar in the walls. And as well as that, some patches of deteriorated concrete on the abutments, on the retaining walls, the soffit, the fascia. So we recommended a structural rehabilitation within 5 years, which we are now within, just at the end of that 5 years. And obviously, any rehabilitation work needs to maintain the heritage attributes of the bridges. So we can move on to the next one. So here's just a quick section through the bridge showing the proposed work, which I'll go into more detail on each part of this on the next few slides. But as you can see, so we're taking the granular fill off and the asphalt. We're repairing the deck, the concrete deck. We're putting a concrete overlay, so basically another sort of 60 millimeters of concrete on top of the deck, in which we're going to place some galvanic anodes. more about that in a sec. And we're not replacing the parapet walls. Instead, we're strengthening them at the base and then applying a sealer on them to avoid having to replace those walls, which obviously have heritage value as well. So we can move on to the next one. So starting with the parapet walls, as I said, we're trying to, well, the plan was to keep those in place. And the best way to do this is to apply a couple of different sealing products. The first, the migratory corrosion inhibitor, it brings chlorides that are already in. So I said the chlorides come from the de-icing salts. When they get into the concrete, they start to corrode the rebar. It can cause cracking of the concrete, breaking away of bits of the concrete. So the migratory corrosion inhibitor is sprayed onto the outside of the parapet walls, and it brings those chlorides to the surface and gets them out of the concrete. So it reduces future corrosion. Then the pigmented sealer goes on the top of that. And that pigmented sealer stops any further water and chlorides from getting into the concrete. It also bridges any small cracks that are already in the concrete. And if needed, to prevent people graffitiing the walls, we can apply an anti-graffiti coating on top of that pigmented sealer as well. So there'll be 3 products: the MCI, the pigmented sealer, and the anti-graffiti coat. The sealer would be Sikagard or equivalent, and it comes in a range of colors. We're looking at one called precast gray, which seems to fit the existing color, but if we want to match it even more exactly, we can provide sort of paint swatches to Sika, and they can try and match the color of the existing concrete even more. So moving on to the next slide. The concrete deck, so it's sort of down below this asphalt, will remove deteriorated concrete with a lightweight chipping hammer so as to not damage any of the sound concrete. You can remove concrete with high chlorides in as well, but we're not recommending that due to the heritage nature of this bridge. We don't want to damage it any more than necessary. So instead, we are recommending to put a concrete overlay, so basically 60 millimeters thick of concrete on the top of the deck. And in that overlay are galvanic anodes. They connect to the existing reinforcing in the deck, and they sort of act as a sacrificial metal. So instead of the existing rebar corroding, the galvanic anodes will sort of get gradually eaten away over time instead, and protect that rebar. And on top of the concrete overlay, we're putting new waterproofing to protect the concrete from any future chlorides or water ingress, and then new granular and asphalt on top of that. And at the same time, we're strengthening the bottom of the parapet walls down at the deck level to bring them up to code as per vehicle collision loads that they need to be designed for. So on to the next one. The road surface itself, I realize there's various ways of sort of giving it a heritage look. At the moment, on the recommendation of the city's asphalt expert, we're proposing to put a sort of normal HL8 base course, HL4 surface course, but then apply a thin layer of sand, cement, and asphalt concrete mix on the top of that. So I guess after proof rolling the asphalt, you apply this thin layer of the sand, cement, asphalt, and then you roll it again after that's been applied to get a smooth finish. But there are other options as well. A slurry seal can be added to the top lift, or you can have a double lift of tar and chip finish. So those are other options which can be considered. And going on to, I think it's the final slide. The guide rails. So I think these were added, from what I've been told, in the 1986 rehabilitation. So they're not original, but they are now substandard in that they don't adhere to the MTO's current guide rail standards which have been crash tested, especially the ends which curve down into the ground. They don't deflect backwards under the impact of a vehicle, so they're not safety compliant. So they should be replaced. I know the HCD said that metal guardrails should be rebuilt in stone or painted green for the same reason that these existing guide rails are not compliant. The stone wall would also not be compliant as an end treatment, as it would not flex in the in the event of a collision. So it's not it wouldn't be a safe end treatment. So it really needs to be a guide rail similar to the existing one, but with a different end treatment on it. We would try to put timber posts in to match the existing look, and that's certainly an option that still exists. And we can put a timber plank on the back, just as sort of extra protection and aesthetics, I guess, for pedestrians if that was preferred. There were two. The green color was something that we wouldn't advise because it's sort of an extra layer of paint that could flake off in time, and we weren't sure if it was really achieving the rural look that it's meant to. So at the moment, we're not advising the green color. And at the ends of the guide rails, if we go to, I realize there is one more slide. So if we go to the next slide. These are the two standard end treatments that exist at the moment. So the one on the left is the soft stop, the one on the right is the sequential kinking. We're currently advising on the sequential kinking, which is the standard end treatment for a guide rail. And I believe that was the last one. If we go to the next, I think that was it. So yeah, over to any questions.
Jumping around on me. Thank you, Matthew. I'll pass it over to Councillor Michaud.
And thanks for the presentation, Matthew. I just have a couple of questions. You mentioned the graffiti protector or whatever. I don't know, I can't recall what term you use, but is that something that will eliminate the possibility of having graffiti on it? Or are you talking about covering up something to cover up graffiti with? Or is it...
Yeah, it's something that's just easier to clean the graffiti off. So if someone does graffiti the parapet walls, you can just, I think, wash the graffiti off, and it becomes a lot easier to do that.
And in the past, we've been painting over the graffiti down there. Is that correct? I guess staff could answer that question.
Yes, it's my understanding it was painted over.
Yeah, because there are graffiti, I'll call them graffiti cleaners just for this conversation that work on buildings in the downtown core. I know that, and they never paint over graffiti because it really doesn't work very well. It just builds up. So that's something that I think would be good to have on this. And the other question I have is with regards to the guardrails. So you mentioned the MTO. That's just a non-debatable. Is that right? The way what you presented the guardrails is what we have to use because of the safety aspect of it, or?
Pretty much is, yeah. If we're designing this to code, I mean, any sort of deviation from the MTO standards would need to be sort of directed at the city's end. I guess there's
no other options of for aesthetics wise. They are kind of not very attractive at the ends of the month. Is what I'm wondering.
Yeah. I did speak to our senior traffic engineer today to see if there were any other options, but not really. They're all a variation on a theme, and those are the two themes.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have a question of staff, if that's okay. And my question is was our city staff capable of preparing this heritage impact assessment? Could we have done that ourselves without hiring outside group?
So when we have an infrastructure project or we have a city capital improvement project, we typically will retain consultants to provide advice in different factors. So we typically do not prepare our own heritage impact assessments for city assets. We review them and provide advice back to the consultant as well as the city team that has been organized as part of the project management. So we did not, and we typically do not.
But I guess my question though is, do we have capable staff that could do this?
So the role of the Heritage Kitchener planner is to review and make recommendations and provide advice to this committee as well to council, not necessarily to prepare the materials to support. So in order to have an independent recommendation and an assessment, we look to external resources and consultants to help provide that recommendation and advice.
I appreciate it. The only reason I mentioned that is that I felt we have capable staff, and if we do the work ourselves, I mean, we're responsible for it, and we're going to our staff is going to approve what we do. I just would have thought it would cost less, and it would leave more dollars available for other heritage work. But that's the only reason I asked the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. Peter.
Yeah, just a quick question. So the bridge is now 100-year-olds plus, and the remediation work will be done. Is there any sort of projection of how long the life cycle of this bridge will be extended by this work?
Yeah, I mean, I believe it would be around hopefully 35 years or so. I mean, there's two, I guess there's the two main elements of the parapet walls and the deck. Yeah, the galvanic anodes will protect the deck for, the region of 35 years. We would hope to get something similar out of the parapet walls as well. The reinforcing is coated, which, gives it a little bit more time than black steel, like uncoated steel. And the combination of the migratory corrosion inhibitor and the pigmented sealer will give it, a fair bit of additional protection. So we'd be looking at that sort of measure. I mean, there's always the chance that some minor repairs need to be done in the interim, but before it would need to have any major work done to it again, we would be looking at about that time.
Are there any items or any sort of additional things that could be brought to the repair, which would represent good value in extending its life cycle? Or have we hit the sweet spot on that?
And I think we've considered everything. We did look at some other measures, for instance, putting a refacing on the soffit of the bridge, but we didn't feel that it was, we did a life cycle cost analysis for that one, and we didn't feel that one was worth the additional money at this stage. It would have been quite difficult to have done for reasons of access and the shape of the arch. So that one we ruled out. And we will be doing some patch repairs to the other elements as well, to the soffit, to the abutments, the retaining walls. So that will be done at this stage along with the other work.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Jean.
Sorry, I think you're muted, Jean.
Yeah, you're still muted, Jean.
Mute. Thank you.
There you go.
If there's someone else that has questions, I don't want to take away from their time, but if I'm next in line and nobody else has questions or comments, I'll go ahead.
Go ahead, Jane, and if we need to, we'll intersperse other questions.
Okay. Well, first of all, Councillor Gazzola wondered if staff could do this HIA in-house. I'm sure they could. However, because this is a heritage bridge and it's, I should say, one of the first to be rehabilitated, especially with the city, I'm very glad that we did go to an outside consultant. And I must say that I was very satisfied with the comments, the historical references used for this, the two bridges. A couple of things that have come up, which in my research and working with those who've done the bridge studies for the region, the dates 1924 and 1929, that comes out as new information. And also the consulting engineer of the day, Herbert Johnston, and the civil engineer draftsman's G.C. Hagedorn. And I would hope, I don't know if we're doing any plaquing beside the bridges as the region has, but it would be good to have this indicated someplace in the area of the bridges once it's done. I also noted that there's warning to the contractor, or it will be on noted on the contract when the people are the contractors, the engineers are working, that in other words, we have two heritage properties, 1265 Dune Village Road, which is the old storage building for the twine that was manufactured there. There's another one, 1252 Bean Park, and I'm not familiar where that is. What is the reference? That's a new one for me. I don't know if the consultant or staff can mention where it is. The Bean Park, 1252 Bean Park, the Dune Village. We can leave it till later and maybe somebody can help. There's one thing, not to be picky, but I will be on this one. It's page 15 in the historical context section. And it's noted that Homer Watson's birthplace is built by Adam Ferry. And the reference for Adam Ferry's condition with Homer Watson or hookup is the gallery and the studio that was built over in Lower Dune. But Homer Watson's birthplace was built by his grandfather about 1807 and is at the corner of Tilt Drive and Dune Village Road today. So I know people will go through things for references, and I'd appreciate if that were corrected. I'd just like to now go to the bridge work. The parapet walls, the pigmented sealer. Now, we're very concerned about chipping if we paint the guardrails. So I'd like to know what will happen with this pigmented sealer that's going on the parapet walls. Are we absolutely sure that we won't get chips off that? Maybe the consultant.
It's a valid concern. And I think the pigmented sealer, I think that's a good, when I was asked about the lifespan of these repairs, I guess when I was saying 35 years for the walls, I guess I'm thinking of the walls themselves. You do make a good point. The pigmented sealer will probably have to be replaced at some interim point in that time because, pigmented sealers won't last 35 years. They will start to flake a little bit in that time. So, but in this case, it seems like to me, the pigmented sealer is sort of essential for protecting the concrete underneath. So it would we still advise to put it on, prevent chlorides and water from getting into that concrete. And then if it does start to flake, it would need to be reapplied. I guess the difference with the guide rails is that they are already galvanized. So they already have protection against water and chlorides. So adding a painted coating on the top would be a sort of unnecessary addition that could also flake, and therefore you're not seeing a lot of benefit for the addition of that green coating. And at the same time, we didn't think that the green coating, necessarily achieved the rural look that I think was the intention of that clause in the HCD. Would be interested to hear any views on that from the committee here, I guess, as to maybe whether this a green look on a guide rail has been used in other locations, and whether you felt it worked as a measure to make it look more rural or not. But maybe we weren't quite sure that the painting it green would really achieve that.
If I may, so this pigmented sealer, it will cover the parapet walls. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. And at present, there seems to be a bleeding of black material on this concrete. Is that carbon escaping?
I would say it's more likely water damage or chloride damage. Now that you mentioned it, we'll certainly take a look and try and get a better idea of what's causing that. But when it's covered by the pigment, I mean, it would just be aesthetic. I mean, and I don't think it's affecting the structural integrity of the wall. And once it's covered with a pigmented sealer, it won't be seen. So, but yeah, we'll certainly take a better look into that.
Right, and from Shalish, or the city engineer, I just received a note about this, and I would assume that you try to clean it before you clean it, or have a serious look, that there's nothing else bleeding, so that when you put the sealer on, it would be like, in other words, you're putting sealer over a clean surface. Would you do that?
Yeah, you have to blast clean the concrete before you apply the sealer. So yes, it would. Otherwise, the sealer won't stick to the concrete.
Right. And I don't know, maybe Garrett had wanted to make a comment in there, and I cut him off. No? Okay.
Nope.
And back, thank you. Back to graffiti.
Jean, just before you continue on with your next question, I wanted to check with Peter to see if he had a follow-up on this same line of questioning.
Okay, fine.
Yes, thank you. I did have a question about the sealer. I have done aesthetic repairs to concrete using a sealer, and having the choice between a transparent sealer and an opaque sealer really makes a difference in the aesthetic look. So the opaque one is like a layer of paint that sits on top of it. The transparent one penetrates into the surface of it, and the pigment is carried into the concrete. So the one looks like paint, and the other looks more like natural concrete, and ages better. Is that an option in this case, or is the sealer that you have to specify to perform the way that you want it by necessity an opaque and paint-like sealer?
I don't know if a transparent sealer can be used along with a migratory corrosion inhibitor. There are advantages of the pigmented sealer as well, I guess, in that it can bridge over narrow cracks in the wall. But I mean, I know like a transparent sealer will generally last longer, and I suppose it would be less visual if it did start to, yeah, you don't get the peeling that you get with the pigmented. We can certainly take a look into it, but I don't think that it works with the MCI. So I'm not sure you'd get the same protection, but yeah, it's a good question, and we'll go back and we'll take a look into that one.
Steve Allen, I presume you have a comment to make in response?
Yeah, just following on that. I mean, obviously, the best protection we can give to the bridge and the longevity is what we want to go for. But that aside, you know, it's possible we could just do some test patches, and I'll talk to the consultant about this. So before the contractor actually applies the material, we might be able to do some test patches just to see what it looks like. But I think we should, as a group, take that back for discussion.
Great, thank you. All right, Jean, back to you.
Thank you. I just had a question about the graffiti, and I want to be clear. As we mentioned earlier, that the way to get rid of the graffiti has been for some group hired by the city to come out and paint over the graffiti. And so it's looking pretty patchy. We've got seeping black on the railings, and then we have these patches of different gray covering the graffiti. And this bridge, it does get graffiti. So again, could I hear how we're going to prepare to deal with the graffiti so that we don't end up, you know, we fix the bridge and, you know, in about 2 months' time, the graffiti guys and girls are out there. And what are we going to do to clean it up? So how's this all going to work? Or what are you going to do?
I think there's two options. I mean, one, we can put an anti-graffiti coat over the pigmented sealer that would, so that simply makes it easier to clean the graffiti off. So at least when you wouldn't have to paint back over it again, you should just be able to wash off the graffiti. But if for any reason that didn't, the graffiti still left, you know, left some patches of graffiti on there, I guess if you have a pigmented sealer, you could just reapply it in with the same color. But I think the anti-graffiti coatings work fairly well. And there are anti-graffiti coatings that are compatible with the pigmented sealer that we're specifying.
Right. So I take it this will be noted in the minutes and then shared with the engineers. And I guess, Matthew, you will make note of it in your notes as well. Graffiti it's one thing we can't ignore. It happens. So now I come to
Jean, sorry, Jane, yeah. We're gonna intersperse again because there's a bunch of hands that I believe also want to directly talk about the graffiti. Can we go to them and then we'll come back? Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Michaud, I assume you would like to speak to the graffiti?
Thanks. I just noticed that Steve Allen had his hand up, and I'm wondering if he was going to speak to their graffiti as well. My question is the treatment that you speak about, Matthew. Is that cost effective compared to the way graffiti is? And I'll go back to the downtown buildings because that's what I'm familiar with. Is that comparative to the way the graffiti is removed from just any building downtown? I don't know if staff can speak to that at all. What I'm asking is the cost, is it necessary to put that treatment on if there are ways of getting rid of graffiti without it? Because I'm pretty sure every building downtown doesn't have treatment on
it. Steve, can you provide an answer?
Actually, I was going to say I can't provide an answer, unfortunately. The graffiti piece was not something that we really dwelled on a lot about the structure. So,
Okay.
and this, unfortunately, it does involve other groups at the city that I'm not sure what their practices are to remove graffiti on bridge structures. So I'm afraid it's something that we might have to go back and speak to them about.
I guess it could be part of this report, because if what Matthew's saying, the treatment, I don't know what the treatment's cost, what the cost is, Matthew. It might not even be that much. It might not even be worth it. But if you put treatment on it and the graffiti, if you can guarantee the graffiti will be removed easily, then fine, we can just stop this conversation. But if it's just as a way that the graffiti won't adhesive to the concrete or the place where the artists do their work, if it's treated as you speak to.
Yeah. I noticed my colleague at Wood, Emma, has her hand up, and she was doing a bit of research into these anti-graffiti coatings. So she might have some insights.
Emma, I'll pass the floor over to you. Hopefully you can provide some light on this graffiti situation.
Thank you. I was just going to say we are waiting right now to get the recommendations from the provider, and that also goes with how much it will cost. One thing to point out is that when the graffiti is removed, you have to reapply the anti-graffiti coating, but it's essentially just a wax that goes over the what's existing, so that you can blast spray with water the graffiti off and then reapply this wax coating. But we would have to kind of get a cost comparison from the city with the teams that you work with to do the downtown graffiti removal to be able to compare, because I don't think we really have experience with what that costs. I also wanted to touch on what Jean said a couple of minutes ago about the kind of the leaking black material. And if you notice when you look at the bridges, some like patchy blue paint, there's a lot of different colors and things going on with the parapet walls. And that's one of the reasons we went with the pigmented sealer rather than a transparent sealer, is that pigmented sealer gives us a chance to make the parapet walls a uniform all the way across, rather than having the patchy color that exists right now.
Great, thank you very much. I believe that was helpful in addressing some of the concerns. All right, Jean, back to you again.
All right, thank you. The road surface across the bridge, I believe I heard, and Shalish did send information that we were going to look at and make sure that it had the tar and chip appearance, which in the Heritage District 513.3.1 talks about tar and chip finish. So I want that noted, and I'm assuming from the comments of our consultant and the city that will happen. Now, if I could go to the guardrails, it would be really helpful to see a sample of what you're proposing. Does the consultant have a picture that they could put up on the screen?
Yes, we can bring up the presentation again. Is that the easiest? It was the last page of the presentation.
I'd just like to see that guardrail again.
Through the chair, one moment, please.
Thanks, Sarah.
But bear in mind, it would have timber posts. So I guess that would be the big difference on this one.
Okay, so Matthew, you are looking at the one on the right, sequential kinking.
Yeah. That's right.
And these posts that I see sticking into the ground, the vertical, those will be of timber?
Exactly, yeah, yeah.
Right. And you mentioned that behind it, you could have timber as well?
That was, yeah, only if it was
Inside?
Yeah, because that's what they have in the existing as a timber plank that runs along the back of the timber posts.
Right.
I guess it offers a little bit of protection for pedestrians walking past so they don't catch themselves on the posts.
Right. So my concern is, and I just want to be clear. So what you're basing your response about not doing as the Heritage District Plan says, to build it in stone, that it's not in accordance with the Ministry of Transportation documents. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, a stone wall wouldn't be these guide rails were added in 1986 to act as a protection for vehicles so they don't slam into the blunt end of the wall. So these will, these will flex or compress under the impact of a vehicle, and therefore they won't do as much damage to the car. So they're sort of protecting the vehicle as well as the bridge itself. So a stone wall wouldn't provide that. I mean, a stone wall would simply be a sort of asphetic wall on the approaches, which isn't really needed. So there wouldn't be an advantage in using a stone wall. It has to be a guide rail, but it should be a guide rail that adheres to the new MTO code.
But my concern with the look of this is the very end of this. And I don't quite get your point that if somebody ran into it with a car, that in other words, it would be a softer impact than if you had a stone wall there.
Yeah, it moves. The whole last panel will deflect backwards. So it's like a crumple zone in a car. Like this whole end piece will move backwards and release some of that energy. Whereas the existing one is simply the rail is bent down into the ground. So it wouldn't really provide the same crumple zone.
Is there not any, what would I say, provision for a historic bridge that the design of this end could perhaps look more in keeping with instead of just a plain old box? Is there nothing in your research that you have found an end that would be comparable?
Yeah, I actually don't think there is any more. You used to be able to have you could have a concrete ramp at the end of a parapet wall, but that was phased out a few years back. So I don't think there's anything that's actually code compliant that would be more similar to the existing one. I mean, again, I can take it away, discuss it with my graphic team, see if there's any other ideas out there. But not as far as I know.
I would appreciate if you would do further research on this. And I'm sure you may know the organization Historic Bridges of America. There's a whole website on it. And I'm sure there are adaptations. Granted, it's American, but maybe there's something in that information in their research that might provide an alternative. So I would appreciate if you would have a look at that more seriously.
Okay,
It
yeah,
looks
look into that one.
like, sorry, Gina, it looks like both Steve and Heidi had some potential responses to that as well. So I'll let them speak. Heidi and then Steve.
Yeah, the guardrail is something we discussed with Victoria. I know a couple times, like the benefits of the, the stone wall following the HCD plan, the green paint. And I know in our discussions with her, we sort of interpreted the spirit of the HCD plan as trying to maintain this rural setting and the rural context. Like we have views north and south of the bridge of the water courses and the trees beside. So I know, Matt, you and I talked about this quite a bit and tried to figure out what materials, natural materials, could be used to achieve a more rural aesthetic. And that's where we thought the timber might serve as a bit of a softer version of what you presented. It is always tricky, right? When you get these heritage sites and trying to incorporate health and safety and be complementary and sensitive to the site itself. And so I think they need to balance. I think installing something that won't meet code or won't actually provide the health and safety that is required for this site wouldn't be a great direction. But certainly the point is taken that, I know, Matt, you've been discussing with other people internally if there are other options. I think we can keep that discussion going. I think it is something that we need to balance, like both things need to be met. So I guess I'll just leave it there. I think, natural materials with a rustic aesthetic, I think that's like what we should be going for personally from a heritage perspective, while still maintaining and meeting code for health and safety reasons.
Great, thanks, Heidi. Steve, I believe you had a hand response as well.
I did, but I lowered it because Heidi and Matthew covered it. So just that we'll take it back. But I'll just reiterate that whatever goes back or whatever we're taking out and has to be replaced, it does have to meet the standards. We can't put back something that doesn't meet the safety standards of the day.
Great, thank you. Jordan, I see your hand is up. Jean, I know you have some more points. I just want to see, Jordan, is this directly related to the guardrails as well? Okay, so Jordan, and then we'll come back to you, Jean.
Yeah, just quickly, thank you, Sam. Yeah, to Jean's point, I think it would be good to see maybe a couple of examples, because I'm sure that there are examples specifically from Ontario as well, like notwithstanding examples in the United States or elsewhere, but examples of heritage bridges and them being brought up to code and all of that within the province that would speak to MTO regulations and all of that as well. So it would be good to see maybe a few examples just to see what the best path forward would be. But I do agree that when you're dealing with a roadway, I mean, those safety considerations would, in my mind, supersede conservation district outlines from 35-40 years ago that have changed considerably with road traffic and everything like that. So but to Jean's point, I think it would be good to see some examples, because I'm sure that there have been similar conversations happening with heritage bridges that have happened even in the last 10 years that have happened. So that would be good.
Great, thanks, Jordan. Okay, Jean, back to you.
Thank you. And I do appreciate the consultant team and your concern. And I understand, because I've worked on heritage bridges and bridge projects for some 20 years as a municipal councillor. So I really do understand where you're coming from and what you're faced with. However, I appreciate Jordan's support and other members of the committee for looking at alternatives and the potential. And I welcome the team's openness to looking at other ways that we might meet the code. So thank you on that. And I now have one final question, and this would be, I do believe, for Garrett, our staff. We've had Wood Consulting working on this project, but I understand now that this will have to go out to tender the job. And is that correct? And could you maybe explain how it will be tendered and how we will determine who gets the contract? And maybe I'm out of line on you telling me who gets the contract, but I'd really like to know, because again, I've worked on the Freeport Bridge, the Bridport Bridge, many other bridges, the Hartman Bridge out in Willamette Township. And I'm aware of I've been on those teams, and I'd like to know how the team is going to, if you're letting a contract, and how you're going to do it.
So through the chair, thank you for the question. I'm going to defer to my colleague, Steve Allen, who can probably speak to the tendering process.
Thank you.
So thanks for the question. Through the chair, this work will be tendered as we do most construction work at the city, which is we put it out for public tender through the procurement division. So generally it would be, you can put qualifications in the tender, but generally it is low bidder. And that's essentially how it's done. If there were specific concerns you had, then we can see if there are things that we could put into the tender about sensitivity to the heritage. I'm not sure what you were thinking there, but the work that is being proposed is mostly concrete work. So there's a lot of contractors out there that could do that. They wouldn't necessarily need expertise in historic structures. So if you could elaborate on some of the concerns you have there, that would be helpful.
Right. Thank you, Steve. And my concern is that we have whoever qualifies for the job, that they take the recommendations in the HIA seriously. And I know it's tempting to do low bidder, but we need to be really, just think, Councillor Gazzola was concerned about the expense of this HIA. So it's pretty clear, and the consultant team have given very good guidance. So I wouldn't want that money to go down the drain by a cheap bidder who says, I can do it. And then you get through, and then you have to come back to council for more money and that kind of thing. So I really feel strongly about the recommendations that we've had today from the committee and the HIA. And may I just say, is Wood, if I read correctly, Wood is going to be part and parcel of the team when you're doing the work, or not?
Yes, so Wood is our consultant for the design and contract administration as well. So what that means is during the construction, they will be, they will provide on-site inspection. They will be certifying payments to the contractor on the city's behalf. But going back to your earlier point, it's really about, making sure that whatever contract we have out there is clear and complete in terms of the requirements of what the contractor has to do. And also with that piece of Wood being providing inspection on site, they can spot any issues of the contractor being out of compliance with the contract early. So I think with what I'm saying is with the right staff and the right contract, there really shouldn't be much concern about the contractor, the contractor not performing their duties the way that they should be.
Right, thank you. So that's my list. Thank you, Sam. And thank you for committee members bearing with me.
Thanks, Jean. All right, any further questions or comments from committee? All right, well, this item does require a motion, which means that we do need someone to move it. So is there anyone? Councillor Gazzola. All right, and we do not need a seconder in this case, so thank you, Jean, nonetheless. So the motion as put forward by staff is that pursuant to section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act, heritage permit application HPA 2022B004 be approved to permit the bridge rehabilitation works on Dune Bridge number 1 and Dune Bridge number 2 in accordance with the supplementary information submitted with the application and subject to the following conditions. 1, that the final heritage impact assessment be approved by the Director of Planning prior to the issuance of a heritage permit. 2, that the color of the pigmented sealer be reviewed by heritage planning staff and related heritage clearances issued by staff to proceed prior to application. And 3, that the details of the new guardrails be submitted for review and heritage clearance by heritage planning staff prior to installation. So that is the motion on the floor.
Question.
Yes, Jean.
What is going to happen to the notes of this meeting? Can staff answer? We have a lot of notes and a lot of direction. What is going to happen with that? Is that going to be given to the consultants and the engineering department?
I'll turn it over to Sarah and perhaps Garrett.
Through the chair, the recording of this meeting will be made publicly available as with past meetings, and the meeting minutes will also be posted to the website as with past meetings.
Through the chair.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was through you, Chair Sam. So we're hearing the advice, and we're taking very seriously the ideas that have been discussed today, as the resolution that's in front of you does call for additional information for the pigment sealer as well as the guardrails. And I think that we've heard what you'd like us to look into. As a result of that, once that final research is conducted, the HIA would have to be updated, and Diksha would oversee the review of the updated HIA to ensure that those items have been addressed as part of the further consideration. So that's how we would circle back on all of the items that you asked us to give further consideration for. They would be part of the final HIA.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions regarding the motion? All right, we'll move to a vote. And Councillor Gazzola, are you rising on anything?
Just voting.
Okay, great. In my past experience has shown me that raising hands is not the efficient way to try and conduct the vote. So we're going to do the vote by roll. So when I call your name, please let us know if you are in favor or opposed of the motion. Councillor Chapman.
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
In favor.
Councillor Michaud.
In favor.
Jordan.
In favor.
Robin.
In favor.
Shannon.
Favor.
Jean.
Yes.
Peter.
In favor.
Myself, I am in favor. Ilona.
In favor.
Victoria.
In favor.
Thank you. Have I missed anyone on the committee? All right, that passes unanimously, which means that it will move forward. So thank you. And I believe that there needs to be more work that is done before we move forward with the HIA. And so that work will move forward, and then Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it would move forward to council for any of the future work, correct? Perhaps Garrett knows.
Through you, Chair. So this is designated under Part 5 of the Heritage Act, so it could be approved at a staff level, and that's why the recommendation is to the Director of Planning. However, as I noted earlier, we will ensure that the final HIA does have further discussion and information on the items that were discussed today.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, so that then concludes that item. So thank you to Wood Consulting for your time and for answering everything today, as well as to staff. All right, so we're going to move on to item 3.2, which is our subcommittee updates. There's no motion required on this item, so we'll just have our subcommittees provide their updates on discussions and their action items. And because it's also Diksha's first meeting with us, if you can provide just a brief overview of what it is that your subcommittee does when I call on you, so that she can become a little bit more familiar with what work you are doing, that would be great. So we'll begin with our Decolonizing the Heritage Process Subcommittee. So Robin, I will pass it to you.
Hi, everyone. So we didn't get a chance to meet in January for various reasons. And I know and I hope that folks understand that. And if you don't, I ask you to look at what's happening in Ottawa right now. Yeah, so all that to say, I sent an email to Victoria and Martin and Sam earlier today, and we're hoping to schedule a meeting in the next 2 weeks. But I do just want to say to the committee, with everything that's been happening, like this has to be a priority, and it's really important that you are paying attention and listening. It is Black History Month starting today. There are various members of our community who are being harassed online right now, and statements are being made by various nonprofits. And it feels really bad that it's been kind of, this one feels like we're fighting to try and get it even going, and not getting a lot of support from folks who have more power and time, because I definitely do my best, but I'm spread thin trying to make change happen as a feminist historian. And so, yeah, I just want to have that added to the minutes, and just the importance and significance of today as far as starting Black History Month, and the fact that these are actions that we have to take. We can't just show up to book clubs and then assume that we know what we're doing. And so for Diksha, I will tell you what we're working on specifically is reviewing essentially best practices in heritage right now through an anti-racism and decolonization lens, and then hoping to provide some recommendations to City Council and then possibly the province after that, if the opportunity presents itself over the summer, while recognizing that currently it is not the time to tell the province of Ontario anything related to this. They will not listen to us. And we know exactly where they stand on this type of work. So yeah, we're hoping to essentially just get some best practices, particularly for the committee, based on discussions and things that all of us have heard over the last year. I've been on this committee for a year, and I'm a trained PhD in Canadian history, and I've been very concerned about some of the comments and language that I've heard just in this space. So thanks.
Great, thanks, Robin. We'll do our Designation and Municipal Heritage Register Subcommittee next. Actually, before we do that, I'm sorry. It is also grant writing season, and as a also training PhD candidate, I have also spread a little bit too thin right now. So questions or comments about the Decolonizing the Heritage Process Subcommittee? Great, thanks everyone. Now we'll move on to the Designations and Municipal Heritage Register Subcommittee. Peter.
Thank you. The committee met on the 29th of 26th, sorry, January. And the subcommittee has been working on a sort of primary goal is to very clearly see what we can do in order to move buildings along the heritage process towards designation, sort of along the entire chain of that process. So to that end, our sort of first sort of large task as a subcommittee was to get all of the information about designation together. So we had a review of the heritage designation process previously, and now we think we have collected the sort of base material that we need, which is essentially the listing of all the buildings on the Municipal Heritage Register, all the buildings registered in Part 4, all the buildings that are covered under the designation of neighborhoods, and also very recently all of the statements of significance that have been prepared by the city that go with all of those properties. So, big pile of information, and we have it all now, and we're starting to sort through it. And Ilona has really taken up the task on starting to try and stuff all that information into a form that that we can work with. So we talked about what our next steps are, but we also, just to interject here, we had a guest that Councillor Chapman had invited, and it was Gail Poole. And Gail is a planning professor at Waterloo, and he is running a senior level course this term, which involves the registration of heritage buildings. So what they're attempting to do through the course, as Gail explained, brief summary is, the first part is to gather all of the information on heritage properties, not just for the city of Kitchener, but for Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, North Dumfries, the entire Waterloo region. So this is information which sits in separate silos, and the intention is that they will take all of this information and collect it into one central database. So this is really interesting for us because we're sort of covering a lot of the same work and sort of paralleling what they're doing, except their database is operating on a regional scale, and ours is working on the city of Kitchener scale. So it's interesting to see what potential synergies can happen there. The other focus of that planning studio is to then take all of that information and evaluate it, or sift through the information and put a value on a relative value on the heritage property itself. Does it have a high value? Does it have a low value? And that's part of the exercise of their studio, which is to develop a new criteria for the evaluation of heritage properties on that list. So we had a bit of a discussion afterwards on, sort of what that means, right? We have a set of rules under the heritage regulations for the evaluation of properties. That's the lens that we would use for the subcommittee. But there also is there are other ways to evaluate it that are sort of outside the jurisdiction of legislation, which is both interesting and kind of scary from some of our examples. But it's really fascinating, and I think we'll continue to try and sort of keep pace and keep in contact with them to hear what they're doing. I think the other the discussions that we had by pertaining to the sort of list of information is what it is that we are then going to be doing with this information. Why are we evaluating it? What are we looking at? What is the sort of finer grained purpose of it? And I think that's now the discussion that the committee is going to be having as we get up to our elbows in it.
Great, thanks, Peter. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, great report, Peter. I just wanted to clarify that Dr. Gail Poole is actually a professor emeritus from, I think, at the University of Moncton in the Department of Anthropology. So it's not his project at U of W. He's actually representing the Architectural Conservatory of Ontario, and working with the professor of the course that's leading the students who will be doing this work. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Chapman. Jordan.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. I'm just going to keep my video off for the rest of the meeting. My computer started to go really slow on me, so just doing that. Apologies. But I just wanted to commend that team on, Peter, when you were talking about kind of dissecting evaluation and really examining how value is attributed to certain areas and certain heritage properties and assets. I think that's a very, very important aspect of what this is. Even if as you're going outside the bounds of the set parameters that are in place right now, I think it more or less also speaks to what Robin was speaking about too, where we're venturing into kind of new territory and really starting to deconstruct that evaluation process and how we attribute value to things. So I just wanted to comment on that and really commend the team on really looking into that.
Thanks, Jordan. All right, any further questions or comments related to our designation and municipal heritage register subcommittee? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, I just want to say a big thank you to Garrett also for helping us get our hands on some of that information. So thank you.
Excellent. All right, we'll move on to our next subcommittee update then, which is the effects of designation on affordability. And Martin is our lead on that one, but is not here. Jordan, would I be able to trouble you for an update? I know it'll be a brief one.
Yeah, not a problem, Sam. Thanks. Yeah, Martin's not here. It will be just a brief update. We've been continuing on with doing some background reading and preliminary reading, just getting a bit more context on what the study is. For Diksha, it's basically we're looking at more or less putting together a bit of a literature review on what's been studied so far in the last 10 years or so on the effects of affordability, the effects of heritage designation on housing affordability, and whether or not we can really kind of take examples and take literature examples and really utilize them for the city and for our area in being able to really better understand does heritage designation or things in that vein, does that contribute to issues in housing affordability and so on and so forth. So that's the study that we're working on right now. And as I said, Martin and I are still working away on doing a lot of background reading and a lot of just understanding context in regards to this type of project.
Great, thanks, Jordan. Questions or comments related to this one, Jean?
Thank you, Chair Sam. Through to Jordan. I just wonder in this very heated real estate market, whether your committee has done an assessment or an evaluation of how many heritage designated properties or listed properties have been sold, or like the turnover, what it is.
Thank you, Jean. It's definitely on our radar to do that. We're not right at the stage yet of looking a bit more into the heritage, the Kitchener context of things. We're still looking quite broadly to understand the context of this type of study in linking affordability with heritage designation, but it is on our list to look at that and to better understand the specific context for the city of Kitchener.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, excellent. Thanks, everyone. So our last subcommittee is promoting cultural heritage. Yes, so Jean, I'll pass it over to you for the update.
Thank you. I see by the minutes, the January minutes, that promoting cultural heritage, our committee, we were going to resume in the new year, and sad to say, we haven't resumed. And I haven't, I'll claim problem here. I didn't get this going. However, Ilona has something to report because we talked about walking tours, and I think Alona has a very important announcement to make, and I can elaborate beyond. Okay, Alona.
Well, I think you're exaggerating a little bit, but so as part of our initiative, we looked at connecting with other people in the community, other groups in the community that are involved in promoting cultural heritage. And one of the groups that I came across was Juanita Metzger's group, which is it's called Stroll, and they offer walking tours of Kitchener. And it was initially developed to meet the needs of conferences that were in the area, or parents of kids dropping off their kids for university who just want to learn more about the community. So that was the initial intent of forming this group. But when I connected with her, we talked about maybe finding some way to promote Kitchener's heritage for upcoming Heritage Kitchener, or for the Heritage Month. And she said that she was going to look into it. This was back in December. And I just recently heard from her that they have actually come up with a walk that melds together both Black history and heritage celebrations. And they came up with a walk that looks at the early Black history of our community, the earliest settlers, Black settlers that came to our area. And they include entrepreneurs, teachers, domestic workers, lawyers, and musicians that all made a contribution to the history of Waterloo region. And the walk is intended to tell their stories, to tell a little bit about their lives, how they lived, and where they lived. And so these walks are taking place during the month of February. There's 4 actually that were scheduled. But unfortunately, they're all sold out. There has been a great demand for these walks. So it just shows that people really, truly are interested in the heritage of our community, and that there is really a demand for this kind of a service. People are hungry for this kind of information. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Great. Thank you. And if I may further, in today's paper, in the record, it talks about that new walking tour delves into untold history of local Black community. Title is Black Presence in Berlin. And there was also a very nice write-up about it last week, and I don't know whether it was in Friday's paper or Saturday's paper. So it's good to see that the walking tours and people taking initiative to do it beyond just our committee. But I do have another question for staff. Okay, so February 21st, that's the Monday, I'm thinking is that the 3rd Monday in February, which is Family Day, but it used to be Heritage Day, Heritage Monday. And usually in the record, there's a section, what to do with your family on Family Day, which is everybody's home. And I know we have these wonderful walking tours that are someplace in our bank of Heritage Kitchener information. And I would really like to know with which staff person I can connect. And then I will try and support and do what I can to promote this through the local media. And of course, I'm sure that a different generation uses Instagram and Facebook and so on. So I really feel we need to do more with our tour. Like, we have this information, it's sitting there. It just has to be brought to the top of people's awareness another time. So I don't know whether Sam, you can help us, or Sarah, you can help us, or Diksha, maybe you can help us. But we have them online someplace, and Michelle, when she was a heritage planner, had put them all together. So I know there's one for the Heritage Conservation District of Upper Doon. There's one of, I'm pretty sure, Victoria Park and the Civic Center area. I'm not so sure whether we have one for St. Mary's. what is interesting in St. Mary's District is the War Memorial commemorative site, which is worthwhile visiting in the St. Mary's District. So I don't know who would be the contact for me, and I can investigate and promote this further.
Garrett, I'm hoping it has an answer for who to connect with on staff, because as much as I would love to help Eugene, I'm not allowed to speak to the media.
Yeah, we can certainly, if this is a wish that you want to connect with the media, we can do one of two things. I can get you the websites where that information is housed. So we do have the walking tours as well as the voice map tours that were created last year that I think I spoke at in an earlier meeting. And I can get you links to that information if you wanted to contact the reporter at the Record and suggest this is here if they're doing that article. Or alternatively, I can follow up with our communications contacts and see if they were intending on submitting anything to the Record.
Right.
We certainly, we're not in a position to tell the Record what they should report on, but perhaps as promoting cultural heritage preservation and conservation, that might be something that would be appropriate from a member of the Heritage Committee like yourself, Jean, to bring to the Record's attention, and I'm happy to support you and provide you the materials.
Very good. So you're Garrett Stevenson at kitchener.ca.
You got it.
All right, we'll be in touch. Thank you. If there's any other committee members, Councillor Michaud, if you have anything else you'd like to share on promoting.
No, I don't, Jean. I think it's a good idea what you're planning, especially for the Heritage Day or Family Day. And I'm sure there'll be a reporter looking for some story on that. So I don't think you're going to have any trouble getting in touch with someone. I know a couple myself. I could probably send your way.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
And I just had a question. So are you proposing to lead the tour yourself, or is it self-guided, or are you looking for someone to lead the tour? I didn't catch that in what you were saying.
This will be, as far as I'm concerned, self-guided, because we have information that people can download if they have the right website and so on.
Okay.
I haven't resorted to my old bus tours yet, Councillor Chapman.
I'll tell you, I think it's something you should look at, Jean. You did a great tour in Upper Dune a few years back, and there was a lot of people there. You did a great job, so I wouldn't just say no to that yet.
Shannon, I saw you were waving your hand.
I just wanted to touch on what Jean had said about there is an Instagram group. I think it's called DTK Kitchener on Instagram, and it has quite the following. I think it's about 23,000 people, but I mean, it's I think it's a pretty informative site that they use. And then there's also another walking tour in Kitchener as well. It's called Badass Berlin.
Oh.
And it's,
I don't know if I'm there yet.
I know, but I just wanted to put it up there.
You see, you have to have a hook.
Yeah.
It has to be different than, bricks and mortar.
Mm-hmm.
I love looking for scoops. I'm sorry, Shannon. If this is a bad question. Are you a committee member?
Yes.
You are. And what's your surname? Sorry.
It's Shannon Eckelbraun.
Okay, thank you.
No
Sorry about this.
No.
If we were meeting in person, I would have it all down pat.
Not a problem. I've only been here a few times.
No, I'll look at those names on the Zoom.
Yeah, I'll send them to you.
I could just add, when Shannon mentioned the DTK Instagram, that might be downtown. Well, it is downtown Kitchener, and it might have an affiliation with the BIA. So that might be another connection you can have for anything downtown area. Anyway,
look at it, but it didn't. I think there's a website here, but I just thought it might be a good way to promote it, anyways.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll have to look into that BA when you mentioned
Awesome. Thanks, Jean. Other questions or comments for our Promoting Cultural Heritage Subcommittee? All right, great. So then we will move on to our next item, which is status updates on heritage best practices and 2022 priorities, as well as heritage impact assessment follow-ups. Deeksha, I'm not going to put you on the spot for this one this month, but perhaps next month. Garrett, do you by any chance have any updates for us?
No, I do not.
Excellent. Fastest item ever. All right. And our heritage permit application tracking sheet is, I believe, at the end of the agenda for your reference and information. Did anyone have any questions regarding the tracker? All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining our meeting then. We will adjourn and I will see you all next month. Hopefully you'll all get a chance to do a self-guided walking tour at some point through the month. All right, thanks everyone.